Welcome to Real Shame. It's a twice, sometimes more a week show where we review movies from our movie list of shame or movie blind spots. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
All right, this week we got a couple of fun movies for you, movies that I haven't seen. And the first one is before we talk about what we're going to watch, we might as well talk about what we've seen.
What have we seen?
So, Andy, what have you been watching this week?
Okay, so over the weekend, I watched 3 horror sequels. I think the last time, or one of the last times, now the episodes, they're all out of order, I think. I don't know. Sometime long ago, I mentioned that I was watching the Scream movies. And then
you haven't seen 4...
And I was watching Final Destination. I hadn't seen 5, so I hadn't seen the final film in either franchise. I have now seen the final film in both franchises, and I was pretty underwhelmed with both. Honestly, I thought Scream 4 was okay. It's probably better than it had any right to be, but that franchise is really, really long in the tooth. I think the problem with that franchise is because everything still has to be tied to Neve Campbell's character. Mm-hmm. So they've got to constantly be reaching to find some killer that's somehow attached to her life. And I'm not going to spoil who it is in Scream 4 or anything like that, but I was like, okay, because apparently they're going to make a Scream 5.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And it's like, what are they going to do for that? I think it would be different at this point just to have no connection to her whatsoever. Yeah. Don't even have her in the movies. Just have something different going on. I don't know. The Final Destination movies don't suffer from that because it's always like a new crop of people.
Yeah, for the first couple, they had like Ali Larter
tied together by Ali Larter, right?
And then
Tony
her
Todd
character,
and some, But yeah, I think the Final Destination, you can make those till the cows come home because we all want to see a group of people die in creative Rube Goldberg-esque ways.
For sure.
But I thought 5 was just kind of dull. I do like the ending, and again, I'm not going to spoil it, but I like what happens at the end or whatever. But overall, I felt like it was just kind of
twist. I guess is that spoilers?
Yeah. But they're okay, but not great. But they're like masterpieces compared to the last horror sequel that I watched. And it is a sequel to a movie that we watched on this show during the month of October. When we watched The Howling, I watched The Howling 2. Your sister is a werewolf. And that is absolutely abysmal. And I kind of knew going in because Leonard Maltin gives it a bomb. Of course, he gave Earthquake a bomb too, and I disagree with that. But he gave it a bomb, so I was like, this might be pretty bad. And he's right. It's pretty damn bad. I mean, it's just super inept, like incompetent filmmaking at its best, I guess, is the way to say that. Yeah, incompetent filmmaking at its best, which is not a good thing. The guy that made it, he's had, I think, a pretty long career, and I believe he's still making movies now. I don't remember what his name is. He did make Howling 2 and Howling 3, which I haven't watched Howling 3 yet, but I'm honestly kind of curious to see if it's worse than Howling 2. But Howling 2 is just bad on every level.
Okay.
The editing, the acting, the casting, the music, you name it, it's bad. I watched the entire movie because it was kind of like the train wreck that you can't look away from. I couldn't believe it was so inept at what it was, but it is absolutely terrible. So compared to it, Scream 4 and Final Destination 5 are like Citizen Kane of horror. Yeah. So, but that's what I've been watching lately is those horror sequels.
All right.
What have you been watching?
So I also been watching some horror movies. We're just coming off the end of October, so been watching those. So I watched Searching, which is that John Cho. I think they've dubbed those kind of movies Screen Life movies, because I know you've watched the Unfriended series and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I finally got around to watching Searching because I heard it was a pretty good that kind of movie of its own, and I thought it was okay, maybe a little bit better than okay, but it didn't really do a whole lot for me.
Is it a horror movie? Would you consider it a horror movie? I see some people describe it as horror, and then other people just describe it as just like a...
It's more like a thriller.
Thriller?
Yeah,
okay.
Thriller. I mean, yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's more of a thriller than a horror.
Okay.
And then also watched Army of Darkness, which I love. I think that movie's such a blast. Bruce Campbell, Sam Raimi, Ted Raimi, all that kind of stuff is just one of those movies you just kind of put on because you're just going to have a lot of fun watching it, right?
Yeah.
And then lastly, because Sean Connery passed away.
As of the filming of this episode. I think by the time this episode airs, it'll have been A little bit
weeks
ago, yeah.
Yeah. He passed away Saturday.
Yeah.
Or news of him passing away, I guess, occurred Saturday.
Yeah.
I watched that day my favorite movie of all time, and that's Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. So, yeah, I mean, most celebrity deaths don't really affect me, like, because I just don't know the person's. But this one, this one feels a little bit closer than everything else. Like, I didn't shed a tear. I'm not, distraught over it. But this one felt a little bit closer than the other ones that have kind of happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, you've definitely seen more movies with Sean Connery than you have with, say, Olivia de Havilland or something like that. Yeah, I get it.
And it's just coming off the heels of watching all those Bond movies,
True,
and all that kind of stuff. So it's crazy. So yeah, he left more elegant people have written stuff about him, but he's left a pretty big legacy and stuff like that for sure.
Yeah. He seemed immortal, like in Highlander, but alas, it was not to be.
Was he immortal also in A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I don't think I've ever seen that. I think I actually think that's on my list.
It's a good bad movie. It's like a bad movie, but it's like good.
Well, that's like the last movie that he did. I think he has one other IMDb credit after that for an animated film, but that's the last live action thing that he did. Way back when, yeah. All right.
So that's what we've been watching, and a little bit of news, a little bit of old news for you guys. So let's get into our feature review, and our feature review is
The General.
The General.
So, Johnny Gray must race against time to stop Union spies who kidnapped the love of his life, Miss Annabelle Lee, not the Edgar Allan Poe Annabelle Lee, but a different Annabelle Lee, and the Union spies who steal the other love of his life, his locomotive, the General.
Oh.
So, this is our first silent film that we're tackling on Real Shame. It's a film that I have seen a few times before. You've never seen.
Never seen it.
Never seen any Buster Keaton film.
No, I was trying to remember who did Duck Soup.
That's the Marx Brothers.
The Marx Brothers, because we watched that,
but not silent either.
Is it not silent? No. Oh man, I don't know anything. So this might be the first silent film I've ever watched. Then
there you go. So yeah. Anyway, it stars Joseph. He was born Joseph Frank Keaton, but he is known as Buster. He grew up in a vaudeville family, and if you're too young, you might want to look up what vaudeville is. But his parents and he had a little act that they would do in vaudeville, and apparently there's a lot of different versions of this story, but the way that he got the nickname Buster was that he fell down the stairs in front of a family friend, and the family friend said, "Oh, he's a regular Buster," and it just kind of stuck because he could do physical comedy without getting injured.
Yeah.
So he fell down the stairs and he got up without a scratch, and he wasn't hurt, and the guy was like, "Oh, he's a regular Buster." I think later on in life, Buster Keaton said it was Harry Houdini who said that he's a regular Buster, but whatever. It's one of those stories that has many different versions. Apparently, but apparently that's where he got the nickname. But it was directed by Buster Keaton, the General, that is. It's co-directed by a guy named Clyde Bruckman, filmed in Cottage Grove, Oregon, and it was based on a real event known as the Great Locomotive Chase of 1862. Of course, it takes place during the American Civil War, has the blue and the gray. It was also made into a film by Disney, not The General, but The Great Locomotive Chase was made into a film by Disney in 1956 called, appropriately enough, The Great Locomotive Chase of 1862. Or I think maybe just The Great Locomotive Chase. I think they might have dropped the of 1862.
How will we know which locomotive chase it is if they don't have the year on
There's a lot. It was
There's
a Great Locomotive Chase of 1867, 1922, I don't know.
1804.
But yeah, I've seen it probably 2 or 3 times before, so this is my third or fourth viewing. But you've never seen it, and you've never seen a silent film apparently until
Yes.
now. Well,
I don't
now
think
you
I
have.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
So
might have seen some like Milliers, like short films and stuff like that, but
yeah,
I don't think I've seen
Trip
like
to
a
the Moon and stuff.
feature length silent film.
All right, so this is your first feature-length silent film. So give us your impressions.
All right, I think for me, it just felt really slow. Like, and I think I just had I had a hard time like focusing and paying attention to the movie. Like, I'd find my mind kind of wandering during the movie and stuff like that. So I don't know. So it didn't really capture my attention that well with the movie, and I don't know if that's just the nature of it being a silent movie or if that's the nature of the movie itself. But it just it was hard for me to kind of stay in the movie and stay focused on the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the standout for all this stuff is, Buster Keaton's kind of tricks he does, or the stunts he does, I guess. I don't know what the correct word would be for that.
Yeah.
But all those are very interesting and very cool, and they make the movie more interesting and stuff like that. But honestly, I think it would have been better if it was like half the length. You know what I mean? I didn't really feel for the characters. I didn't really feel for the story and stuff like that. And it seemed like, it's interesting that you said it's based on true events, because to me it just felt like a loose premise for him to be able to do some of these fun things. And maybe they did take that to do this kind of premise, but it just seemed like there was a through line, but it just seemed like it was just more of a vehicle for him to kind of do all these kind of cool stunts and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And I just didn't really feel for him. I didn't feel for the characters. It probably doesn't help that he's for the South in this movie. I'm just saying, just a little bit. So that's kind of, like I said, I'm kind of torn, because I think I should like this movie a lot more. And I'm sure, like, in the academic sense and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot to this movie and a lot of pull from this movie, but on first viewing it didn't really pull me in.
Are you a time traveler from the 1920s? Because people and the critics in the 1920s did not like this movie either. It wasn't until later that it was kind of revisited and became more of it wasn't a hit. It didn't make did not make its money back. It lost money. But I think you're crazy. I really like this movie a lot, and I think that it's actually very thrilling. I think the only part that really kind of maybe drags a little bit is when he gets off the train and rescues Annabelle Lee. Mm-hmm. And kind of that section where it's nighttime and they're kind of in the house.
But that the changing of the filters or whatever they did, the tints,
from like sepia to like awesome. A blue. Yeah,
like that blew my mind. Like I didn't think
blew your mind.
Yeah, it blew my mind. The blue blew my mind, because I didn't think that was something that they were capable of doing or something that would happen. So when it went to night and all of a sudden it turned blue, it got rid of the sepia tone. I was like, whoa, they did this? They could do this? So sorry, I interrupted.
No, I'm glad you like that part of it. But yeah, I feel like that may be the only part of the movie that kind of is a little bit slower. But I think the reason I feel that way is because you just had this whole sequence where he's on this train and it's, the camera is kind of moving along with the train. And so you're seeing him do all these stunts or whatever. So inevitably when he gets off the train, you're like, more of the train, please. Yeah. So he gets back on the train with Annabelle Lee as they rush back to tell the Confederate forces that the Union forces are on their way. And so it picks back up again there. But I really love Buster Keaton. He's probably my favorite so you've got the big three silent film comedians. There were more silent film comedians, so I'm not dissing the other silent film comedians, but the ones that people think of are Charlie Chaplin, Harold Lloyd, and Buster Keaton. Those are kind of the big three. There was a couple of others, as I say, or not more than a couple of others, but there's people like Harry Langdon and Charles Bowers, Fatty Arbuckle, who Buster Keaton did some short films with before he started making feature films. People know Fatty Arbuckle mainly because he was involved in a rape scandal, so that's not a good thing. That basically ruined his career. Buster Keaton is my favorite out of Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton and Harold Lloyd, but just because I really love his physicality. He did do all of his own stunts. He was the Jackie Chan of his day.
What's that? Is that foreshadowing?
Is that foreshadowing? But no, I like to see him. I think that whole introductory sequence, or not introductory sequence, but I think that whole part where he's on the train at the beginning of the movie is actually very exciting and very thrilling, despite the fact that this movie is at this point almost 100 years old. We're just shy of that. But I like all of that stuff. Most of the gags, most of the humor lands for me. I find myself laughing a lot at what he does. Not everything, but I find myself laughing at a lot of what he does. And then when he finally does get Annabelle Lee and they get back on the train, she's also doing some funny things, right? She's also kind of involved in the comedy. And she's also kind of kicking ass in a way too. She's like tying ropes across the tracks, you know, between the trees, and then when the Union train comes through, it like gets the trees, you know, caught on the train or whatever, all that stuff. But the stunts where he's like riding on the what they call the cow catcher at the front of the train, and he picks the beam, and he throws it down, and knocks the other one out of the way. So, all that stuff is just really cool.
And he starts throwing it into the thing, which I'm like, that can't be real wood because he's throwing that way too. Either he's super strong.
He was pretty strong. I mean, just because he was such a physical guy or whatever. But no, I really like the movie. I mean, I don't know. I've seen it in the past, so maybe that helps. And I've seen silent films now for a long time, so maybe this being your first one, it was hard to kind of ease into it. And
this sounds strange for me, but I kind of wanted less story and I wanted more antics with it. You know, I think the really parts of the beginning where he's, I guess, falling for Annabelle Lee or trying to court her, and then he's trying to sign up for to join the army or whatever. And stuff like that. Like, I think that stuff could have been probably excised. Like, I don't think it adds a whole lot to it and stuff. And the one thing, and could be my naivety of the whole thing, but when they called him an engineer, I didn't think of him as being a conductor. I thought he like built the train.
Oh yeah.
Like I thought he was like a engineer, like in the more modern sense of like a mechanical or like machine engineer kind of stuff like that. Not someone who's running the train. So that made more sense to me so for me it made sense that they wouldn't want him to join the army, but then knowing that he's an engineer, as a conductor kind of thing, I guess I kind of got lost. But that's just splitting hairs, and that's just a little bit of where I was kind of confused a little bit with some of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of that stuff that happens before he gets on the train at the beginning. Like, I think it's funny. He gets off the train, and there's the two little kids that are in town that just follow him around and do whatever he does, right? He tips his hat, and they tip their hat as they're walking down the sidewalk. And then he goes to Annabelle Lee's house. Well, she opens the door for him, but they come in as well. He sits down next to her. They sit down on like a little love seat area. And he wants to give Annabelle Lee a kiss, and the kids are sitting there. And so he's like, all right, I'm going to pretend like I'm leaving. So he puts his hat on. He opens the door. They walk out. And he just closes the door, and he goes back and sits down. It's just little silly kind of things like that I think are funny. Also, when it's nighttime and when he's underneath the table, he's hiding. So you've got the Union generals and forces there that are discussing what they're going to do the next day. The one guy's got the cigar that he has too close to the tablecloth, and it burns a hole in it. And first it burns Buster Keaton, but then he's able to look through that eye hole and see Annabelle Lee there. So just little touches like that I think are funny.
Kirby and I were talking, like, how do you think they accomplished that? Because I think she thinks, from what I understand, I might be misremembering, she thinks they shot that practically. And I think they probably did something they borrowed from Méliès where they didn't expose that piece of film to shoot through, like they maybe masked it off on the camera and then they re-exposed it whenever they shot.
I agree with
stuff.
You. Yeah.
It didn't look
practical to me. Yeah. But so Buster Keaton's dad is in this movie. Buster Keaton's dad's name was also Joseph. You remember Buster's name was really Joseph. There was apparently a whole long line of Josephs, but his dad, Joseph Keaton, plays a Union general in this. So at the end, you've got the climactic train scene that goes across the bridge where he set fire to. I mean, honestly, I was impressed because it's been a while since I've seen this. I was impressed with just the amount of people that were involved in this. So there's a lot of Union forces. There's a lot of Confederate forces. And apparently this movie was very costly to make. But I read... So the climactic train scene, it goes across the bridge over the water, and the bridge breaks, and the train, and it was an actual, train that fell into the water. That shot was the most expensive single shot in silent film history.
Wow.
It cost $42,000, and adjusted for inflation as of 2020, that is $602,955, according to the internet. Yeah, so that's how much that cost in today's dollars. And apparently, the wreckage of that train sat there for about 20 years. It sat there until World War II. It was like a tourist attraction. They just left it there. Yeah,
tourist attraction for a movie that not a lot of people liked.
Yeah. Well, so that was the thing. So Buster Keaton, that kind of leads into his career. He started as a silent film comedian working with Fatty Arbuckle, and he basically played second fiddle. Excuse me, not silent fiddle, although he was silent. Second fiddle to Fatty Arbuckle. Well, then when that was kind of over, and those were just short films, which I don't think any of those are available on Blu-ray, but I know they're on DVD. But around 1920, he made a film called The Saphead. That was his, I think, first feature film. And he kind of enjoyed creative freedom for the first few years, where he made things like Sherlock Jr., Steamboat Bill Jr. Actually, I think Steamboat Bill Jr. came later. But The General kind of sunk his creative freedom chances anymore.
He kind of got put in what they call like director jail or whatever.
Yeah. So they're like, dude, we can't give you this much freedom anymore. So United Artists was the company that distributed his movies up until that point. And after that, he signed a deal with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, MGM, and they didn't give as much freedom. After that, he made movies with them. Early 30s, he made some stuff with Jimmy Durante. They started, I think, 3 movies together. And then after that, his career went... And he hit the sauce a little bit. He had some some alcohol problems and just basically career problems in general. Around the 1950s, he started kind of having a resurgence. His films started to be evaluated a little more than they were, because they were kind of forgotten. He started acting in television a little bit. He's even in an episode of the original Twilight Zone. But sadly, I think that episode sucks. Honestly, I hate to say it. I love Buster Keaton, but I hate that episode.
It's so cold-blooded.
Yeah, I don't really like it. And then he's in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. But I think if you were an actor or actress in 1963 and you had a pulse, you were in that movie, because that movie has friggin' everybody in it, including Jimmy Durante, who he had worked with before. His final film was A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum in 1966. It was released after his death because he died early that year, sadly. But that's Buster Keaton's career condensed in a nutshell.
Is The General your favorite Buster Keaton movie, or do you have another one that you hold?
A good question. My favorite...
Not to put you on the spot.
No, I was thinking about that, actually, when I was watching it. My favorite has kind of always been, I think, Steamboat Bill Jr., because that's the one that everybody knows, where the house falls down on him and he's standing just in the area where the doorway is.
Oh, yeah.
Or the window or whatever. Yeah, so that's the only thing, because a cyclone hits in that movie and he gets blown all over the place, and that's what blows the wall of that house or whatever down. I think that's always kind of been my favorite, but The General is right up there. I think when I was watching it this time, I had forgotten how awesome it was. So I was like, man, those are kind of neck and neck. And then he's got a lot of short films that he didn't do with Fatty Arbuckle, that he just did, on his own or whatever. And a lot of those are really funny. He did one called 1 Week, where he and his wife try and build a do-it-yourself house. And it's kind of a precursor to movies like The Money Pit with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long, or Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream Home, stuff like that. He also did a movie called 7 Chances, which was remade as, I think, The Bachelor with Chris O'Donnell back in the 90s. Remember that one?
Is that the one where he has to get married to get his inheritance?
Yeah, that was a Buster Keaton film originally called 7 Chances. So he has a lot of really good stuff. And again, it's kind of like watching Jackie Chan movies, even when they're not that good, or even when you don't like them as much. Yeah, you still appreciate the stunt work, because it's just really cool, and it's impressive that these guys do that kind of. Same thing with Tom Cruise when he does the Mission Impossible stuff. It's like, damn, he's crazy.
That guy can run.
Yeah, I can't believe he did that.
I think in hearing you talk about this movie, I think my biggest disconnect is, I think a lot of the movie's subtlety was lost on me.
Yeah,
and I don't know what that was, and like I said, I had trouble kind of really focusing on the movie. But I think a lot of the stuff you talked about that you found really humorous, and some of those elements, I didn't really catch this first viewing, so maybe this is something that I either need to warm up to, or on a subsequent viewing I would feel probably a little bit different.
I think what I need to do is I need to compile some of his short films that are the best, and give you a copy of those, let you watch those.
Oh, yeah,
and then also like stuff like Sherlock Jr. Because Sherlock Jr. is the one where he walks into the movie screen and it becomes part of the movie.
Okay,
so it has a lot of visual trickery, like Méliès or something like that.
Very cool.
And then Steamboat Bill Jr. is the one where the hurricane or the cyclone or whatever hits, and there's all kinds. He's floating by a tree, and the house falls on him and all that stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff that. You're just scratching the surface of the world of Buster Keaton. So we'll go further.
I'm not closing that door.
Don't close it.
I'm gonna jump in.
All right.
All right. Okay, anything else?
93% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes with a 92% audience score. Roger Ebert 4 stars. Leonard Maltin 4 stars.
So I'm definitely wrong on this one.
You've got your opinion. Perfectly valid.
Yeah. Well, sometimes. I'll let the audience decide on that. So if you're watching us on YouTube and you've seen The General, leave a comment below. Let us know where you fall in it. Are you in the majority or you're in the minority with that? We also answer viewer questions on our following episodes, and those are sent to us at our email address, realshame@gmail.com. We're also on social media on Instagram @realshame. Like, subscribe, share, spread the word, because that does really help. And next time we're going to watch what movie and why?
Alrighty. So one guy that Buster Keaton was a big influence for is a guy that likes to do his own kind of comedy and likes to do crazy stunts. Johnny Knoxville. No, just kidding. Not Johnny Knoxville. Although Johnny Knoxville has cited Buster Keaton as an influence. But no, next time we're going to talk about another guy who cites Buster Keaton as an influence. And that guy is Jackie Chan. In Dragons Forever, one of his 80s action movies. We'll talk about that next time.
All right, we'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.